Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Stephan with Goulds Water Technology, and today we're going to talk about the alternator. And we can see here it's a CentraPro labeled alternator for lead lag alternation and for duty standby. Part number AWAVFD. Some literature that is available. Today we're going to be following the Quick Start Guide that's available. One thing to note, the Quick Start Guide has two methods to wire lead lag alternation, but it does not include the wiring for the duty standby. Duty standby would be included in this manual, the full IM or Installation Operation Maintenance Manual. So if we look at the overall system here, so we've got an alternator. The alternator can be used on the Solo 2. That's the example we're going to use here. We've got two Solo 2s, specifically 1AS15s. Or it could be used on the SPD, the single pump drive. So we're going to take a look at a couple 1AS15s in particular. And we've got a duplex system. So therefore we've got two pumps, two drives, two transducers, and one alternator. In this case here, we just have one tank hooked up for both. Let's start with a quick overview of the 1AS15. So, that product comes with the instruction manual for all of your information required for that product. Also today, we're just going to look up amperage on the service manual. So if we look at the 1AS15, the 1AS15 is single phase input, single phase output. So we're using just a standard single phase motor. And the 1.5, the 15 is horsepower, and it basically says we're good to roughly horse and a half. At the end of the day, it's really about amperage. And if we look up here to the max amperage, it tells us we can handle a pump that goes up to 12.2, and that would be service factor max amps. So in a system like this, we just have two of them. So we're just going to focus on one unit here. The other unit is going to be wired exactly the same. And it's going to be the same model, 1AS15. So I'll do a quick overview of the input. So these are 230 volt supply input. So we do have a little black piece of tape on the white wire, just as a reminder indicating that we do have 230 volts coming in. So 230 volt is required for this drive, so that's on the input. Typically, input is on the left-hand side, and our output is here on the right, so that's power to the motor. So if we look down here, we can see that the 1AS15, you can use that on a two-wire motor, which is what we have here, two blacks and a green. Or you can use that for a three-wire motor, which would have a yellow, black, and red. So it's all color-coded there. But in this case, we're using a two-wire motor, and both pumps are the same. Let's now take a look at what we call the UIB, or User Interface Board. This is our motor overload selector, so it's a switch here. And these are the settings. We can see 1 through 10. And we can see some amperage values here, and those are service factor max amps. So if we have the motor in front of us, we can look on the motor, and then we can just get this information. If not, let's say that the motor's in the ground already, we don't have the opportunity to look at the physical motor, we can always look that up in the service manual or the made manual. The type of pump we have in there is a 10GSO5 422 pump motor combination. If we look that up, we'll see that the service factor max amps is 4.8. So the rule of thumb here with single phase in, single phase out, your 1AS15 is find the closest value. If we look at this chart here, we look at the numbers and find the number that is closest to 4.8. We can see that would be 4.7. So that is setting 1, and we want to make sure this black arrow here is set to number 1. Once you do that, you never have to change it, right? So as long as we got that pump down in there, sort of set it and forget it. The next here is a series of dip switches that they are all factory preset to the left. So the installation manual will describe all of those, so we're just going to leave those to the left. You have an up and down arrow to change your settings and a mode arrow, so we'll get into that. Let's take a look at the wiring. Now, for now, we're just going to focus on the wiring out of the box for the drive. That would be your transducer, your sensor. That's all pre-wired, but it is color-coded, so in case we need to shorten this wire or put another cable in there, then we know how to wire that up because it's all color-coded. So black, red, white, green. The other wire here that does come with the box is a jumper. It's a run-stop jumper, indicating that when this is closed, this is going to allow the drive to run. If this is open, it's going to be off. So for this setup, we're just going to leave that jumper in, and then we're going to leave our transducer in. Our other wiring here is going back to the alternator, and so we'll talk about that next. Let's take a closer look at the alternator itself. So here's the front cover. It's NEMA 3R, and up across the top here, those are your options for time alternation. And you can see here we can go from 1 hour to 48 hours. So that's very easy to change that. So we're going to leave that at 1 hour for now. So that's our alternation time. And so we are going to use this example. It's pre-wired for alternation based on runtime. So we'll talk about how to wire it up for runtime. We'll have a brief discussion on wiring it for elapsed time. So those are 2 different ways to wire. A third different way to wire this is for duty standby. So today we're going to focus on wiring and setup for lead lag alternation based on runtime. All right, so we set our time setting. The change lead, so we'll have some examples of that. You can manually quickly change which one is the lead. So that's our lead right now, and this is our lag. All right, so we can manually change that if we want. And then we have another couple LEDs that indicate when each unit is running, or if both are running, right? So that's what we have on the front cover. So let's open up the box. So we do need separate power for this panel. We can bring in 115 or 120 or 240. In this case here, we're just using 120 power coming in. So you have those 2 options to provide power to your alternator. So next, let's take a look at the wiring. Again, this is all pre-wired for lead lag alternation based on runtime. And so if we just kind of take a look here at pump 1, this is going to pump 1 here, pump 2 going to pump 2, and we also have some other terminals. Again, it's clearly labeled pump 1 and pump 2. So one thing that's interesting about this is for, again, lead lag alternation based on runtime, we can see that we have wires to the relay. So if we look at the relay here, we can see that we're wired to the relay. So if we just follow these here, that's your input terminal here. So input to the relay, and again, your other unit is going to be exactly the same. So one way to tell, if we're coming up to a job site, we're wondering, how is this thing wired? If we're going to the relay, that's based on runtime. Our alternation is based on runtime. If we're not wired to the relay here, then that's based on elapsed time. So, we have to sort of figure that out before we do the wiring. Do we want our lead lag alternation based on runtime? Then we're going to be connected to the relay. Or if we want it on elapsed time, essentially we don't wire to the relay, and these are just simply jumped. So you're going to see a jumper here, connecting these two terminals, and a jumper here. And that is based on elapsed time. The nice thing about this is all of this wiring here does not change, regardless of lead lag alternation runtime or elapsed time. So this doesn't change. If you want to wire this up with duty standby basically means that you do not want both pumps running at the same time. So if you want to run it up, if you want to wire it based on duty standby, then you have to look at the installation manual because that is not in the quick start guide. Okay, so we talked about the wiring for lead lag alternation based on runtime. And we know we're wired for runtime here because it's going to the relay. If we're not wired to the relay and we've got our terminals jumped in here, these two terminals, then we're wired for lead lag alternation based on elapsed time. All right, so now that we've got our wiring down, which is in the manual, there's a couple things that we need to do to set it up. We need to set the pressures up. And we basically need to set SP2, which is set pressure 2, and SP1, which is set pressure 1. So one of the tricks to do that is we got to have power to the box, right, to the drive. And so we can see we got power, we got the LED lit up, but it's not going to run because I pulled out the run stop input on both drives. So it is stopped right now. So notice over here we have lead pump. Pump 1 is the lead. So this is set to lead right now. So we've got to set the set pressures, SP2 and SP1. I'd say one of the tricky things about this is SP2 is the lead. SP1 is the lag. That is the default. You could change that if you want, but right out of the box, SP2 is the lead. That's your higher pressure. SP1 is the lag. That's your lower pressure. You want those two to be at least 10 psi apart. So how do you set those? So again, we're going to start off with number 1 is our lead. And I've got this disconnected here, so it's not going to run. And now I can set my SP1 and SP2. So simply press and hold for a second. And why is it saying SP2? Because SP2 is the lead, right? So just do it again, SP2. As long as that's blinking, we could change that. So we're going to increase it or decrease it. And let's go with 75. Okay, so now SP2, which is the lead, is set to 75 psi. So how do I set the lag? Well, what I have to do is change the lead to number 2, which means number 1 is the lag, right? And I can confirm that by just simply pressing that up button again. SP1, remember that is our lag pressure here. SP1 is 60, and we could change that. So let's go with 60 on SP1. Again, our lag pressure, our lower pressure. So we have a difference of 15 psi between the lead and the lag. So we would want to do the same thing for the other unit, same exact way. And in terms of your setup, your SP1, SP2, that's all you have to do. Just remember that you have to have at least 10 psi difference between the lead, again, which is SP2, and lag, which is SP1. So we have our AWAVFD, our alternator, wired, and it's wired for lead lag alternation based on runtime. And we've got the alternation set for 1 hour. Currently we have number 2 as our lead, and number 1 is the lag. We set our set pressures, SP2, which again, that's our default lead, that's 75. SP1 is the default lag, that's 60. We want that 10 psi at least difference between the two. Now, if you don't like that, you can change that. You can switch those so that SP1 is the lead, SP2 is the lag. So that there is a procedure in the manual to do that. But out of the box, SP2 is the lead pressure. And again, you want that to be your higher pressure. So let's take a look and just to observe how it works. Now, we're not going to view the alternation because that's based on 1 hour of runtime. But we are going to see the lead lag operation. Let's take a look at our operation running. So I'm going to give it some demand. So I'm going to open up the discharge valve. So I can see that pump 2, right, that's our lead. Pump 2 is the lead, and it is running right now. All right, so I'm maintaining my lead pressure, which is SP2. All right, so let's give it some more demand. Pressure's dropping. Now what we're going to see as I open this up, we're going to see pump 1 come on when it gets 5 psi below the lag pressure, which was 60. All right? So now we've reached that point. Now we've got both pumps running. You can see here, both pumps are running, and they're maintaining the lag pressure, which in this case was 60 psi. So let's close the valve a little bit. So we'll get to a point where we don't need the lag system again. We're just running off the lead. Again, it's going back to your lead pressure, SP2, which was 75. All right, so now we're going to close the valve so there's no demand. So pump 2, which is the lead, that's going to turn off when it gets to 30 hertz or half speed. So a couple things that we can do. We could change that lead lag anytime you want, right? Simply pressing the button, and so now we've got our lead over here. So the other thing that's unique about this is, let's say that our lead pump, lead system, lead drive is off. What happens is it automatically changes from lag to lead. So let's try that. This is the unit on the left, and it's currently set to lead, which means the unit on the right is defaults to the lag. So let's see what happens when something goes wrong with the lead, and we'll see if it automatically switches, if it turns the lag into the lead. So I am going to open up the valve. we can see lead pump turns on. All right, so let's just open it. And we can see that pump 2 is running. And it waits for 20 seconds. Then what you'll see is this will become the lead. So the lag will become the lead. So it'll switch. So we can see that after 20 seconds it switched because it knew we had a problem with the lead. And it automatically turned our lag into the lead. Just as a summary, the AWAVFD, the alternator, is a lead lag alternator, and there's 3 different ways to wire this system up. What we just looked at was lead lag alternation based on runtime, which was wired to the relay. So that wiring diagram is in the Quick Start Guide. The other wiring diagram in the Quick Start Guide is lead lag alternation based on elapsed time. Remember, elapsed time, we're going to jump those terminals in here and we're not going to be using the relay. The third way to wire this is duty standby. And duty standby is where you don't want 2 pumps running at the same time, and you'd have to go to the installation manual for that. The last thing that we want to remind you of is that SP2 is defaulted as the lead pressure. That's the higher pressure. SP1 is defaulted to the lag pressure. That's the lowest one. And we always want at least 10 psi difference between the two. Again, if you want to change that, there is a procedure in the installation manual to change that. But out of the box, SP2 is your lead, SP1 is the lag. Thanks for watching our video today. For additional information, go to Goulds.com.